With that, we bring in Ben Jones, statecollege.com. Ben, welcome. Great to have you with us.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me.
We'll get through a wide variety of topics here. We'll start with Media Day. What were your general impressions?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest impression is just this team is ready to go. I think there's a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and I think maybe if any team this time of year has a little bit of a chip on its shoulder, but Sean Clifford is ready to go. The new guys are ready to go. The defensive line looks big and has lots of options. So I think this is a team that's just ready to go out, but also sort of understands the schedule it's got in front of it and the challenges that lay ahead.
Did you learn anything maybe you didn't know before the day?
I don't know if I learned anything specific other than Mitchell Tinsley's favorite football player growing up was Reggie Bush, but I think the thing that I learned overall was that maybe I've overlooked the strengths of this team and the confidence that those strengths have. I think looking at the schedule, looking at some of the question marks that they have at offensive line and linebacker, I was sort of like, I guess we'll just see. And, ultimately, I guess we will just see. But I think after that day, talking to a lot of people, I think I feel a little bit more optimistic about how Penn State's year might go. And I think that's a testament to the talent they've brought in and a testament to the attitude that a lot of these leaders on this team have. So maybe nothing that I didn't really already know, but I do think something about their psyche kind of convinced me that, maybe these guys are going to be a little bit better than I was giving them credit for.
The media gets a practice opportunity on Wednesday, which is tomorrow. So, Ben, when you go to one of those, what usually is your game plan?
It depends on the time of year. I think early on, you're just trying to get a look at some of the new faces and see how they're built. And, Dennis Sutton is a great example of a kid that I had not seen in person. And then saw him last week, and you go, man, he is a big kid for a freshman. So you kind of learn things about that. When there's always new coaching members, I think we had not seen Manny Diaz do anything until last week, and he was really hands-on, really sort of up in the drills, really being a part of everything. So that was interesting to see. And then later in the year, just kind of depends on injuries and health and everything like that. This time of year, they're still getting into a lot of install stuff. And as much as everyone wants to get you to subscribe to their message board for all the insight, we don't see much that's really going to change, your perception of Penn State football week in and week out. But it is a good chance to see these guys up close and get a sense of what they're made of.
It's interesting you mentioned the size of Dennis Sutton. And Jack Ham and I were talking on the phone Friday. He said to me, how big is he? And I said, 6'5". He says, you got to be kidding me. Right, and not only 6'5", but I mean he's long, good first step. I mean, there's a lot to like about him.
Yeah, I mean he just looks athletic. I didn't have a chance because I wasn't covering the team at the time to really get up close and personal with Aaron Maben. But you think of some of these guys that have been longer and bigger bodied that just have strength and athleticism. I guess we'll wait and see how it unfolds on the field, but. I looked at his arms as he was jogging to a different drill area, and you just go, man, he and I were very different as true freshmen. Once upon a time, that kid is just ready. And I think the exciting thing, if you're a Penn State fan, is, I've gone back over the years and looked at some of those freshman pictures that I've taken, and I've found a couple of Saquon. And, he was a kid that came into Penn State well built, but then you compare him to where he was his junior year and really even his sophomore year. And you go, man, these kids have so much growing to do. And for him to think about him getting that big and that much stronger and that much faster and more athletic is really an exciting and sort of terrifying prospect at the same time.
Anybody else outside of the spring guys that are new now that also caught your interest?
I mean, I think, this is maybe a cop-out a little bit, but I do think seeing Mitchell Tinsley in person was interesting. I think that, just watching him work, he really, I wrote about this, and I think anybody that talked to him a little bit, there's a lot of Jahan Dotson in him. And I think that, Mitchell Tinsley has an opportunity to make a name for himself in his own right, and to a certain extent already has or had at Western Kentucky. So I think, just how he runs, how he conducts himself, how he, seems to take care of the little details. That's the stuff that sort of sticks out with you. And that's the sort of thing that makes guys like him great players, makes Jair Brown great players. In terms of new guys, I hadn't been up that close to Zakee Wheatley until this spring. And I think he's a big, lanky kid that really they said he's 6'2", but he seems a lot bigger than 6'2". As someone who is into the 6'3" area, I can recognize a tall person, and he seems like a big kid. So yeah, I mean, I think again, it's just really getting to size these guys up for the first time. Jerry Cross, another guy in that tight end room that could make some noise this year. So yeah, I think it's just getting to see them, and some of those newer guys that I think were ready to step up into bigger roles are really the ones that stuck out to me.
All right, the basketball's non-conference schedule is officially announced today. Winthrop, Monday the 7th, Loyola the 10th, Butler on Monday the 14th, then Furman to start out the Charleston Classic. Then you got 3 days there on the 17th, 18th, and 20th. Lafayette on Black Friday, 29th, a Tuesday at Clemson. Then they've got Canisius, Quinnipiac, and Delaware State here. Your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's pretty good. I mean, I think the challenge that you have, if you're really, Micah Shrewsbury, Pat Chambers, Ed DeChellis, Jerry Dunn, is you've got to pick up wins in the non-conference, but you also want to pick up solid, wins that help you in those quad one areas. Ultimately, playing in the Big Ten, you're going to have opportunities night in and night out to pick up quality resume building wins. And obviously Penn State in general, just has to win games in general. So I think, from an RPI, from a power ranking, from all the different acronym perspectives, I think this looks pretty good. I think too, from getting, your casual fan involved in following along with the season, you and I know that Winthrop has had good seasons over the last couple of years,
right? But
that might not necessarily move the needle the same way that people go, oh, you remember when Butler, made the Final Four, made the national title game. This is interesting. Clemson, is, obviously a brand that people are familiar with. And I think that's always a plus when you have your team playing against another team that you've heard of. That's going to bring eyeballs in. And I think, the fact that they've played Butler at home is cool for that factor. I think the fact that they go to Clemson is cool for that factor. And then you have a bunch of games in here that, are going to give them an opportunity to win. And I think really for this team, and especially early on in the year, you just want to pick up wins. You want to add confidence. And you also want to have enough of a challenge that how you play actually matters.
Yeah, and plus Thad Mott is now coaching Butler, so that'll be of interest when he comes in. And you don't know who you end up with in Charleston. I mean, you could end up with Virginia Tech. You could end up with Colorado State. You don't know.
Yeah, I mean, people forget, and I'm guilty of it just now too. The whole other side of that bracket aspect, because you're right. Virginia Tech, that's another opportunity to pick up a solid win, and frankly, just a solid little bit of metrics in your schedule for strength of schedule. So, yeah, if I'm Micah Shrewsbury, I think you feel good about this schedule. It's got a little bit of everything, and at the end of the day, I don't think that there's anything on here that you go, man, that doesn't really fit into the equation. And I think that's the biggest thing is you want to be able to challenge yourself and get ready for Big Ten play, but at the same time, you don't want to make it too hard on yourself because that sort of defeats the purpose.
All right, so now let's get to the TV part. John Oran reporting, and now others have picked up on it, that ESPN rejected the chance at a 7-year, $380 million deal with the Big Ten, which tells me, Ben, it's going to be a 7-year contract. That's one. Number two, that CBS and NBC would get exclusive windows or whatever, that means exclusivity-wise, because BTN's going to be carrying some games. But in terms of the network prime part of it, and then Andrew Marchand and both John Oran reporting, and it's $350 million apiece for those, and you and I both know Fox is paying more. Your thoughts on ESPN being out and others being in?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the one hand, ESPN is always going to be the marquee sports brand. Now, I know these other stations are going to argue that that's not the case, but ESPN is ESPN. And I think when you get away from ESPN, there is a loss there. I think at the same time, as you see streaming services and cable packages change and people figuring out different ways to get their content, that if you're on CBS, if you're on, some of these lower channeled number stations, you have an opportunity to bring in even more eyeballs. And I'm not sure how the math works out on all of that because I'm not familiar with the subscriber numbers, but I think we knew from a numbers perspective financially that this was going to be a big deal, literally and figuratively. And I think the nice thing for Penn State is, it's one of those things that as conferences change, as TV deals change, as things change across college football, Penn State's always going to be a brand that is in the thick of the conversation that moves the needle. So I think on the one hand, it's great for Penn State because, all of this money, when you divvy it all up, is going to mean more for Penn State and more for athletics and more for the university and more for the things they want to do. On the other hand, I think Penn State's such a big brand, and the Big Ten is such a big brand that, as long as they're on TV, that's what Bill O'Brien said back with the sanctions. He's like, I don't care what station it is, we just have to be on TV. I think if you're Penn State, you'll be on PBS and people are going to watch, and I think that's always a good sign for that program.
Penn State was fourth last year in average audience per game that they played in, fourth in the nation last year. All right, the streaming part of it. Now, that hasn't been talked about by, everyone's wondering what the streaming element's going to be. Is it Peacock as an addition to NBC? Is it Amazon? Is it Apple? Doesn't matter who. Let's start with this. How do you consume media, Ben? Do you get cable? Do you stream? How do you consume it?
I've been a little bit of both over the last year. I had cable. I actually got cable because I was tired of streaming the Sixers, but that's neither here nor there. So I had cable, but I have been transitioning towards the streaming. For our line of work, I think, anytime, especially if you're watching, let's say Penn State basketball on the road, that 15 to 35 to 45 seconds delay can make a difference, I think, on the tweets and things like that. But yeah, ultimately, there's so many things to choose from that I think it's really just your preference. And I do think the streaming part's going to be interesting to see how that gets added in, because that adds eyeballs. That's more revenue for advertisers and things like that. And, I think it'll be interesting to see if one day Penn State partners with something on their own or something along with the Big Ten to get some of those other sports in the fold, kind of like Notre Dame does and sort of like the Big Ten Network does with some of its streaming packages. I've done that, and that's always been successful as well, because you can watch some more obscure sports at times online. So it's definitely great. When you've got cameras and you've got streaming, you can watch a lot of sports, and that's never a bad thing for the conference or the consumer.
Yeah. What do you think, and this is going to be a pure guess on your part, how do you think, quote, the older fan would relate to having a Penn State football game? I mean, a Penn State football game. I don't mean a bunch. A Penn State football game being streamed.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think on the one hand, we've seen the fan bases transition to mobile ticketing relatively. I'm sure that there are grumpy people somewhere because there's 110,000 of them, so somebody's got to be upset. But I think that has gone pretty well. I think that people are becoming more and more tech savvy, regardless of the demographic that they might fall in. But at the end of the day, I think that it does diminish a little bit the value of that game, because there's something about turning the TV on to ABC and seeing Penn State or seeing Michigan or seeing something like that. And if I have to load up an app and turn on my Apple TV, and then my reward for all of this is watching Penn State play a noon game at Rutgers, maybe not everybody feels like they want to put in that energy or effort to figure it all out. So I think streaming is good. I think it has a lot of, it definitely has a place in the marketplace, but I think at the end of the day, nothing really beats turning your TV on and seeing your favorite team right there.
Yeah, I think about ESPN, you're right about the power of the brand. There's no getting around it. They've done a brilliant job of getting their brand to be number one. But I'll say this, when it comes to other sports, people over the years have found where the games are. So I think that's the old bottom line. Can you find the game?
Yeah, and you're right. That is really the thing. That is it on TV? Can you find the game? Do we have to, you look up whatever cable package is that gets the CBS Sports Network so you can watch the CBI on some sad Thursday evening or something like that. It's always out there somewhere. But yeah, the power of the brand is undeniable. But at the same time, if you broadcast it, they will come. Sometimes it's just a little bit easier than other times.
I actually watched 5 minutes of that on CBS Sportsnet at one point, so I had to laugh. Ben, always a pleasure. Appreciate it very much.
Yep, thanks.